Welcome back to day number 11 of my 31 days of Halloween drawing tutorials right here on YouTube. Today's video, I'm gonna show you how you can draw this slime monster from start to finish, no time lapse, all in real time using a kind of rendered 3D approach to making stuff with Procreate. So if you wanna follow along with me, keep watching. Okay guys, so let's draw a slime monster. So starting out, I'm using a 3000 by 3000 300 DPI canvas. For my brush, the majority of today's tutorial, I'm just gonna use one that comes with Procreate. It's under airbrushing, just the soft airbrush. For this design, it's gonna have more of kind of a rendered 3D look to it, and we don't really want those hard lines with the other brushes, so I kind of want a soft edge. So that's how we're gonna achieve that. And then for the color palette, just like the rest of this series, I've got the color palette made up already. So if you guys want to follow along with the exact same colors that I'm using in the tutorial today, you can download this from my website. I'll link it in the description below. If you just go to bjadell.com under the YouTube reference section, you can download this as a JPEG. Going up to your wrench icon and add, you can insert a photo, bring that in as a separate layer, and then just long press on the colors as you go through and follow along with the tutorial. So let's get started. First thing I want to do, change my color up here to this green. That's going to be the base shape and color of our monster. And then for my brush, like I said, that's airbrush, but I'm going to turn on streamline. So if you touch the brush, go into the brush studio and just turn up streamline, it's going to give us the ability to kind of draw a shape without worrying about any wiggly or jiggly lines. So let's kind of start out here. I need to get this fairly small, not too big, not too small though. And we're just going to go ahead and draw just the basic shape of our slime monster coming down here. I think that looks pretty good. So we can go ahead and drag and drop this in. Maybe if the lines are connected here. If it fills in too much, if you slide your pencil to the left, you can adjust the color drop threshold until it fills in. So there we go. That's going to be the base shape for our monster. And you can kind of see as I go in here, you can kind of see the edge is a little bit fuzzy. That's what we're going for. We don't want that really hard line edge. So next up, I'm going to go to my eraser. Make sure this is on airbrushing and soft airbrush. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure streamline's turned on here. And we're going to draw in a mouth, but to draw in the mouth, we're actually going to erase this section. So to do that, let's just kind of pull this down, adjust in our brush size as we go to make sure we got a nice smaller brush. And I'm just going to remove some of what we just did. So once again, this looks like it's white, but I'm actually erasing. I'm not coloring in, showing up white just because our background is white. So go ahead and erase the rest of this, make it bigger just to kind of speed things up. I'm going to turn off my streamline now. It makes it a little easier to erase if you've got streamline turned off. We'll just go around here and get all of this removed. This is going to be where our mouth goes. And doing it this way and removing it is going to really kind of help us go for that rendered in 3D look. And you'll see why here in a second. So we've got the mouth in there. Once again, this is a slime monster, so it's going to have like drips and drops, and we'll worry about that here in a second. But let's get this mouth worked in here. So to do that, I'm going to go up to my layers and I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to drag and drop this behind layer 1. Then I'm going to go up to my colors, and this third color over, that's going to be the color of our mouth. So we're just going to go ahead and fill this in real quick. All right, so there's our mouth. Let's go ahead and give him a tongue now. So to do this, let's go up to our layers again. We're going to add a new layer, and we're going to set this one to clipping mask. So what clipping mask allows us to do is it allows us to draw on this layer, and it's only going to use the colors that we have on this layer to show where the part goes that we're drawing. It's not going to go outside of those lines. So let's go back up to our colors now. This pink, clear here to the right-hand side. I'm going to select that one. And we're just going to draw in just a curved line here for the tongue. Drag and drop that in there. And you'll see here, if I zoom in, you've got a little bit of a line showing up there. So once again with that, it's the color drop threshold. If you're getting a line, if it's not going to the edge, hold down your pencil. See that blue line up there? As I go to the right, it fills that in. So if you're getting those lines when you're coloring in, that's why. It's because the color drop threshold. So now let's go ahead, go back down to our layer 2, make a new layer, and we're going to just add in the right-hand side of this tongue here. Get the curve to look like I want it to. There we go. So these are on 2 separate layers. Once again, this is really going to help us when we go in and start to do that rendering, and you'll see why here shortly. So now that we've got those, let's go ahead and make a new layer once again. And this is going to be the rest of the inside part of the mouth. So going up to our colors, we're going to select this darker color now here. Drop down the size just a tad. We're just going to bring this around like so. Dragging and dropping the color in there. And that looks good. So the mouth, we got a good start to that. Let's go ahead and get some drips going on in here. So let's go back to our layer 1, and we're going to select the green. We can either hold down our finger here, long press, or you can go up to the color palette, totally up to you. And then I'm going to start to just drag in some drips coming down here. So we erased to begin with. Now we're actually going back in and filling back in on that same layer. We'll just do these in kind of different sizes coming down and around here. Some big, some small. And you can see here I don't have streamline turned on anymore, so it's a little wonky there. It takes a few times going back and forth. So there's that. Let's go ahead and get some eyes in here. So I'll zoom in here so we can see a little bit better. And we're going to make a new layer. We're on layer 1. New layer here. And then we're going to go in with this yellow. Let's just drag around a circle, holding down with our finger, and then holding down with our other one's going to lock in that circle. And we can let go and drag and drop our color over. And I'm going to move this around. I've got uniform selected. I like to use uniform when I'm doing circles just because it keeps that same dimensions and it doesn't turn it into a oval. So now that I've got that done, I'm going to duplicate that circle. So we'll have a left eye and a right eye. And we're just going to bring this one over and just decrease the size a little bit here. There we go. Got the eyes there. Let's go ahead and add some pupils in here. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to the first eye here, make a new layer. This is the left hand one here. And then I'm going to go back up to my color palette here, going with black. Just going to draw another circle in here. Fill that in. Just drag this in towards the center. Make these kind of small here. Got really kind of a beady eye look to them. I think that looks good. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that one. We'll drag this one on top of our other one here. Going to our arrow then, we're just going to pull this off to the side. Making that a little bit smaller. And then I'm going to select white to go in here and add some highlights to the pupil. That one, let's go back to this one. Oops. A little too big there. right, so we've got the pupils in there. I think that looks pretty cool. So next up, I want to go ahead and add some more drips around him. So to do this, it's going to be a new layer once again. We're going to go to the layer 1 and add a new layer. And then this is going to look a little weird starting out, but I think you'll understand here in a second why I'm going to take this approach. So I'm going to go up to my colors, and here you can choose any color you want to make it show up. I'm going to choose this red, and we're going to do the drips with that. We're not going to leave them that color. We're going to change them here in a bit. But what this does is going to allow us to see where these drips are at, and it's going to allow us to do that rendering that I was talking about. So once again here, I'm going to turn on my streamline again for these. Let's erase that. And I'm just going to go around here, adding in these drips just kind of wherever I think they need to go. This is where you can definitely take some liberty and choose where you want to place these. They don't have to be in the exact same position that I'm doing them. So feel free to make this guy your own and do them wherever you want. You'll see for the drips, I'm basically just bringing it down and around to where it's fatter there at the bottom. And it kind of tapers in towards itself at the top. Maybe another one down here. Get that one filled in. Clean up that line on the side there. All right, so we've got our drips. This one's a little sideways, so let me adjust this just a tad bit. There we go. All right, so we've got our drips. Now we need to make these look a little bit three-dimensional. So to do that, we're gonna go ahead and we're going to make a new layer here. And I'm going to go in with this dark green here. And I'm just going to go in with the airbrush. Need to turn off streamline. I'm just going to kind of build up around these. Now with the pupils, I've already got the glow kind of coming in on this right-hand side, so my light source is going to be coming in from here. So I kind of want the shadow built up a little bit more around this left-hand side. It's still going to be around this right, but just not as much. So this is where it comes in that you kind of have to apply more pressure towards the back and let up towards the front. But I say that, and I'm not applying much pressure at all. These are actually really light, not a whole lot of pressure being applied to these. And it's really just kind of a learning curve of trying to get your hand to do exactly what you want it to do. It's going to take some time. So there we go. We've got those in there. So let's go ahead now and let's go back to our green. And on our layer 10, which is our red drips, we're just going to drag the green over and slide to the right. And you can see now those are starting to look really three-dimensional. That's why we did them on two separate layers like that. So now that we've got those, let's just pinch all three of those together. So now they're all on the same layer. So there's that. Let's go ahead and start on shadows and highlights now. I know looking at this, it looks pretty basic, but I'm telling you, it's gonna start to pop here pretty soon. So let's start to add these shadows and highlights. I'm gonna do that first inside the mouth to kind of show you what we're working with and how this is gonna look. So I'm gonna go ahead and you got two different ways to do this. You can do this as an alpha lock or clipping mask. If you choose to do clipping mask, it's going to take up more layers, but you're going to be able to adjust the opacity of the shadows and highlights. If you do it as an alpha lock, it's going to go on the same layer. So if we color in here on this mouth layer, we're not going to be able to adjust the opacity afterwards because it's going to affect that entire layer. I'm gonna go ahead and set them as alpha lock. It's up to you. If you're using a pro model, you could do the clipping mask and have enough layers. Just really depends on what you're working with. So let's go ahead and select black. Once again, I've got this set to alpha lock, and I'm just gonna go around the inside of the mouth here and build up some shadows. So once again, you got light source coming in this way, so like the mouth here, gonna have a little bit of a shadow there given off from that inside part of the mouth. Pulling some shadows down and around here, down and around the top as well. Down these backs here. There we go. Pull a little bit in here. Don't want to get this too dark because it's going to blend in too much of that back part of the mouth, but we'll go ahead and add some shadows in there too, so that'll fix that a little bit. So now that we've got that, I'm going to go ahead and select white just by long pressing here, or you can go up to the color palette. It's up to you. We'll just bring in some highlights here. With white, you've got to be really careful you don't go too heavy with the pressure, just because the white's going to blow out really quick. It's going to get really bright, really fast. So just going in ever so slight is how you need to approach it. I'll pull up some more here on this side too. And with using this rendering technique, honestly, the key to success is constantly changing back and forth that size of the brush. You need to make sure that the size of the brush reflects the lines that you need to make. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and go to layer 5 now. I'm going to set this to alpha lock as well. And just bring in some black there so you can see now that that's kind of separating that back part there. And you can see it a little bit better. So we got the mouth. Let's go ahead and get the tongue now. So to do this, I'm going to go to layer 3 first. This is the top one here. And I'm going to set this to alpha lock as well. Going back up to my color palette, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use this red here at the bottom first. We'll bring this up. This a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, like so. I'm going to go back in with this brown here towards the bottom. You can see that's starting to build that up. Now I'm going to select the white, kind of bring the white across the top, fade it in. So you see you really get that three-dimensional look. I'm going to go back in with some pink here and just bring it up a little bit more to the top so the fade's a little bit more even. And then we're going to go over and do the exact same thing on the right-hand side. So go into that. We're going to set this to alpha lock. Bringing in that darker color, going in with white there towards the top, and then going back in with the black on that split. So you can see why we use 2 separate layers like we did for the tongue, because we've got that nice split between them. It looks like 2 completely different pieces of that tongue, and it makes it super easy. If you were to try to draw in these lines and those shadows just on one big shape, it would take a lot more time and definitely be a little bit more difficult. So that's why we went that route. Next up, let's go ahead and work on the eyes now. So layer 6, let's go ahead and make, let's make a clipping mask for this one. So I'm going to set this to clipping mask. Once again, you could alpha lock this, but I want a little bit more control over this. So I'm going to start out with this third color from the top here. And then I'm just going to start to kind of bring around that. Going back to black now. Darkening up the bottom here as it comes around. You can kind of see that three-dimensional quality start taking shape. Now I'm going to switch to white, and I'm going to start to bring some white around the front, a little bit more here in the center, and then switching to the yellow then, I'm going to kind of pull that out and around a little bit more to blend this in. Going back to my brown now. This is just kind of a back and forth building up process. And then back to my white. Just get a little bit down here. Now I'm going to go up to my blend or my smudge here. I've got this set to soft airbrush 2. And I'm just going to kind of smudge some of this around. So it blends it in just a little bit more. And there we go. I've got my one eye there. I think I'm going to do just a little bit brighter of a highlight here towards the front. So there's that. Let's go ahead and do the same thing then to the other side. So once again, new layer. Set this as clipping mask. Going back up to our colors, that brown here. Kind of bring this in down towards that left-hand side and the bottom here. Pull a little bit back in here. Then with my white selected, hit this right-hand side. Smudge. Just gonna blend these in a little bit more. And then going back to black, I'm gonna hit the bottom here a little bit heavier. I'm also gonna hit the other side a little bit heavier here on the back and at the bottom with the black as well. And this is where you can play around with it. If it's a little too dark, you can always go in and adjust the opacity by going to the blend mode, hitting that N, and sliding this to the left or right, and just getting it exactly where you want it. And then once you've got that set, you can go back in there and kind of add some brighter areas now that you know exactly how that's going to be set. All right, so there we go. I'm going to drop the opacity of this one. I didn't do that yet. All right, so there we go. We got the eyes in there. So now let's start building up the actual shadows and highlights around the guy itself. So I'm going to go ahead and go to layer 1. I'm going to make a new layer, set this to clipping mask, and this is going to be our shadows and highlights. So going back up to my color palette, I'm going to select this dark green, and I'll start at the eyes. Just kind of start building this up around the eyes. Kind of fading it out as it goes. So there's that, and you can see that's starting to make those pop quite a bit. Kind of bring in a hint of a shadow down here too. That way it looks like there's maybe a little bit of bags here under the eyes. There's some drip going on down there as well. And then let's go ahead and start to get a shadow here on the back. So I'm gonna make my brush a little bit bigger and start to drag in the shadow along the back side, making sure I don't get it too dark. I don't want to lose those shadows that I've already done around the drips. It's down here. Start to build up a shadow here around the mouth. Once again, you can see I'm just going back and forth with my brush size, just so I get it just right. There, and also down here. Around the mouth down there. That looks pretty good there. Go ahead and start hitting the back sides of these drips. Clean that up just a tad where it went over. There's that. I'm going to switch to white now. And then I'm going to hit the front of these. You'll see how often I'm changing the brush size. It's really just to kind of get that perfect size. So not too big, not too small. In front of these. See, everything's starting to really pop now. It's starting to have that three-dimensional feel to it, that rendered look that we're going for. The key with this too is make sure you get in close, because you need to see exactly where these lines are going. If you stay too far out, you're not going to be able to tell exactly where these are at. Let's go ahead and give this a little bit of shine in here, so it's going to make this kind of droop under the eyes pop a little bit more, make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. There's that. Also start to kind of drag in some highlights here around the front. I'm going to lighten up this just a tad bit here. It's a little too dark. Go. Switching back to my darker green, and kind of build up the mouth here, the lip kind of coming around. That's going to look a little bit more 3D. Then going back in with white now, you can go in towards the center, and it's going to make that pop a little bit more. Just adding some brighter highlights here. Kind of makes it, once again, start to look a little bit more three-dimensional. All right, so now we've got that. Let's go ahead and go back in now. I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer again. Set this to clipping mask. I'm going to go in with black. So I want a little bit more control because I might get this a little bit too dark. So setting that new layer is going to allow me to go back in there and kind of drop the opacity of this if I get a little bit too heavy-handed with this black. Basically, I'm just going around a lot of that darker green that I've already done so far, and it's just bringing that out even more so. I think that one's a little bit too thick there. And then also going to go around the eyes as well here. Kind of bring those inset a little bit more. Erase just a tad bit of this as it comes down. I think that's pretty good. So now I'm going to go up to my layer here, and I'm just going to drop the opacity just a tad so it's not as dark. I think that looks pretty good there. And really the rest of this is just a back and forth, kind of building up the look that you're going for. So you could spend hours on this. Doing rendering like this, honestly, is one of, I think, the most relaxing ways to make art on the iPad, just because it is such a back and forth. I'm going to erase this highlight there. It's getting in the way a little bit. So you could waste, seriously, hours and hours just kind of going back and forth, building this up, and just getting the perfect look, the perfect flow of the shadows into the highlights. You could spend forever doing this. And I'm not going to spend forever on this tutorial today because I want it to be a little bit, you know, quicker and easier to follow, so you don't have to spend a couple hours watching this thing. So on a design like this, I might spend a little bit more time just going back and forth and never really feeling like I'm totally done. You could do that if you want. For this, I'm going to go in with this bright green now and kind of add in some more just different shades of highlights here. So once again, it just has more of that three-dimensional feel to it. It's got different values ranging across the entire design. I'm going to go back to my regular green here. Take some of this out and then bring a little bit of a highlight here so it does have that kind of blob feeling to it. So you just got those kind of laid out around. And then back to my black. I'm going to go into my eraser and just kind of erase just a tad bit of this back here. So it lightens it up just a little bit. So there we go. There is our blob guy. Let's go ahead and add a background real quick to this. So to do that, I'm going to go to my layer 2. I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to drag this down and behind. And then going back up to my brush, I'm going to select that, turn streamline back on. And then I'm going to go to my color palette. Select this pink here, making sure I'm on that layer. I'm just gonna draw kind of a funky design around here. Nothing too crazy, just, oops, get this a little bit smaller. Just so there's something back here, I guess. Drag that in, maybe move it, warp it down a little bit so it's not all the way to the top there. Maybe pull it over a little bit to the right. I think that looks pretty good. Kind of pull this down a little bit more. It kind of pokes out there at the bottom. All right, so there's that. And let's make this a little bit more interesting. For this, I'm going to use one of my texture brushes. And let's go ahead. Let's use the soft fabric one. And I'm going to select this darker red here. And I'm going to set this to alpha lock. And then I'm just going to pull in this darker red here from the bottom. Once again, pressing harder and letting up as I go, so it's got a nice fade to it. Then selecting the white over here, we can kind of hit the white and have that fade into the white here. Maybe have that red come up just a tad bit more. And then go back in here with some black just to make it a little bit darker towards the bottom. All right, there we go. And of course, looking at a design like this, like I said, you can go on for hours and hours with this. So I'll show you just my little touch-ups as I walk you through the outro. So that's it for today's video. As always, I appreciate you guys watching. If you like today's video too, make sure you give it a thumbs up. It helps other people see the video, and I want as many people to be able to take part in these learning tutorials as possible. So that helps me get that accomplished. Like I said, 31 days of these drawing tutorials. So we've got another 20 days left after this one. Holy cow. Hopefully you guys will tune in for the rest of them. As for me, I can be found online, bjaydell.com. If you do take part in these, I want to see what you guys are coming up with, so definitely post them online. If you post them to Instagram or Twitter, tag me at bjaydell, or you can also post them in the Facebook group for art that I've got over there called Keep Creating, a group for artists by artists. I will link that down in the description below. Place where you can share your art, meet artists, give feedback, get feedback. It's an awesome place to be, and want you guys to be a part of it as well. So share your designs in there too. Want to see them. I'll be back then tomorrow. Will you? Hopefully you will join me then for another fun-filled tutorial, Halloween themed. So until next time, keep creating.